What's up team, my name is Mark and welcome back to Making Instagram Bangers, the series where I walk you through how I take and edit photos in Photoshop and Lightroom, and where I give you a couple of tips and tricks on how you can improve your photography as well. So today we're going to be looking at a photo I took in Taiwan and how I changed it from this photo right here into this photo right here. Much better, much more moody, a lot more contrast and a lot more life in this photo. So I'm going to be walking you through a couple of tips and tricks that I use. First off, how you can focus the attention of the person looking at your photo using filters, graduated and radial filters, how you can bring back detail in the shadows in some of these sort of dark, murky forest shots and give them a better mood and a better tone. And last but not least, how you can remove tourists from your photos. Really simple stuff using the spot removal tool. Really nice and easy. So without further ado, roll the intro. Let's go. Okay, so with forest shots, it's always a bit of a tricky situation because you've got a lot of contrast. Either the forest itself is really dark if you're sort of outside looking in, or if you're in the forest under the trees, it can be really, really bright if you've got light coming through the trees themselves. So it's always a bit of a tricky situation on how you expose the shot correctly. I always like to underexpose them if I'm under the trees, and if I'm outside the forest, it really does depend on the situation and what I'm going for. So with this particular edit, I wanted something dark and moody and sort of, it was kind of a grey day, so I wanted something a little bit moody, a little bit dark. So I kind of underexposed the picture on this one. So if we jump straight into the edit, the first thing I'm going to do, as usual, is scroll all the way down and hit remove chromatic aberration and enable profile corrections. That way it's done, I don't have to think about it. I'll scroll back to the top. As with all of my edits, I always pull the highlights all the way down, shadows all the way up. That way I know how much dynamic range I've got. So next step is going to be to pull the whites up. So I usually hit the options key and then pull towards the right until I see a few white dots. But because this photo is quite underexposed, if I do that, it's going to be way too bright and it's not going to be the type of photo that I was going for, which is dark and moody. So I'm just going to put it down a little bit and kind of eyeball it. There, plus 59, that looks fine. So now towards the blacks. So I usually put it until I see a few black dots and then stop. But because I'm going to go for a faded, moody look, I'm going to pull it slightly further, somewhere around there we go, minus 29. I'm quite happy with that. Okay, so I'm happy with the overall luminosity of the photo. Now, because it's one of those dark, foresty shots that's got a lot of detail, I'm going to pull the clarity way up, somewhere around, there we go, plus 57, something like that. Now, don't worry too much about how sharp the image is getting right now, because we're going to soften it up using a fade in just a second. Now I'm just going to hit the white balance, set it to daylight, something like that. I want to try and bring in a little bit of warmth into this image. You could eyeball it using just the slider, but I always try and go with some of the default settings and just play around with them until I've got something that I like. In this case, daylight looks like the better one for me. Okay, so now that the overall luminosity and contrast is set right, I'm just going to scroll down to the tone curve and I'm going to put 3 dots here in the shadows, midtones, highlights. There we go. Now with these sort of foresty shots, because they get really contrasty between sort of the light of the trees and the darkness of what you can't see, I always like to pull the blacks up a little bit and just get a little bit of a fade. There we go. And then you can pull this down to introduce a bit more contrast. Pull this up a little bit. There we go. And now we've faded out some of these dark areas, just adding to that subtle dark tone. Now, if we look at before and after, you can see we've kind of created this really moody atmosphere. It's just a subtle little trick, just crushing the blacks. And if you look in the top left corner, you can actually notice that we've regained some detail. So we've softened it up while still remaining really sharp, and we've gained some detail, and we've created this sort of moody atmosphere. So this is one of the cases where fades work really well. And I feel like the image is slightly too desaturated, so I'm just going to pull the vibrance up a little bit, somewhere around here. There we go, that's nice and strong. I'm quite happy with that. Okay, so I'm happy now with the overall look of the image. Now it's time to start moving things around a little bit and focusing the attention. So the first thing I'm going to do is add a bit of a vignette just around the corner so we can focus the attention right on the center. So if I could scroll all the way down to effects, and then I'm going to pull the vignette somewhere around let's say -20, something like that. I'm quite happy with that, just to focus the attention of the eye slightly more towards the center. Now, I want most of the attention to be on this top area here, so I'm just going to pull these graduated filters, just something like that, just around these bottom left corners that don't need as much detail. Maybe just a little, something really subtle, something like that. There we go. If we look at the before and after, so it's quite subtle, but it really ensures that you're looking at the top portion of the screen and not so much on the bottom. Now, I want this area here at the top where the bridge ends to be a focal point for this photo. So I'm going to get a radial filter and just put a ball right here, something like that. And then just bump the exposure up just a tiny bit. There we go, something like that. Let's play around with it a little bit, move it around. There we go, something like that. Now the attention is focused more around the top. Now, I feel like there's slightly too much green going on here. So one trick just to add a little bit of color is to come up here, go towards the corner somewhere and just add another radial filter with a little bit of warmth to it. So if I go back here and then just push the warmth up a little bit, something like +30. Maybe if I dehaze it a little bit, just add a little bit of haze to that corner, something like that. There we go. So we've added a little bit more information to this image, where this area here was quite dark and there was nothing going on and all the focus was on here. Now we've added sort of more details into this photo, something extra to look at, giving it a little bit more character. So we've got a lot of light here, a lot of light here, and then we've got all these dark patchy spots around the bottom. There we go. Now the last step, I'm going to start looking at some colors a little bit. So if I scroll down to the hue, saturation, and luminance panel, I can start playing with the colors. Now, I want these greens to be slightly greener, something like this. There we go. Maybe if I pull the saturation down just a tiny bit on these greens. There we go. Just to go with that sort of moody, strong green, but also with a bit of orange kind of look. I really want these greens and these oranges towards the top to separate from one another. So if we look at the before and after, there we go, something like that. I'm quite happy with that as it stands. Okay, so the last thing to do to this photo, because right now this annoys me to no end, is just to get rid of this guy right here in the center. So I'm just going to zoom in a little bit. There we go. And then I'm going to grab the spot removal tool right here. Spot removal tool. And then I'm just going to paint over him. So with this tool, you kind of want to go overboard just a little bit. So not just focus on him, but also paint a little bit around, because there's some sort of feather that applies to it. So you want to make sure you cover the whole area. Something like that. There we go. And it's done automatically. He's gone. So what this has done is it's taken all the area that we've brushed here. It's gone and taken it from somewhere else. So if we zoom in a little bit, all this area here has now been covered using this area here as a model. And so the tourist that we once had is now completely gone. Now, you could spend time and do this properly in Photoshop and make it a little bit cleaner, but for all intents and purposes, this has worked fine and we can't see him at all. Turns out there's another tourist here, so I'm just gonna get rid of him as well. There we go, just grossly painting over the top, something like that. It's not super precise in this case, but I mean, it works fine. You wouldn't be able to tell there was anything there in the first place. And there we go, 2 tourists gone, dealt with. Now, one last thing is, I like the luminosity on this bridge, but I just want to pump it a little bit more. So I'm going to grab the brush tool and just slowly brush over this bridge. There we go, just making the brush a little bit smaller as I go. Something like this. There we go, and I'm just going to bump the exposure up just a little bit. There we go, and a bit of contrast. Now the trick is, whenever you brush something and add a bit of exposure, if you add a little bit of contrast, it kind of offsets the fact it's too bright, and voila, we're done. So obviously the last step is to crop this photo to the 4:5 Instagram ratio, something like this. Boom, look at that, absolutely gorgeous. So there you have it, using only simple tricks in Lightroom, a couple of filters, just a bit of brushing and the spot removal tool, we've taken this photo and made this photo right here much more exciting. And especially in those dark, moody forest shots, using a bit of a fade, although sort of counterintuitive, it does enable you to get a bit more detail and also crush some of that contrast without losing sharpness. So you still got a really sharp photo, but you're not losing any detail and you're not overwhelmed by the sheer volume of contrast you've got in the photo. So there you have it, guys. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Really simple stuff, and it really changes the way you look at photography when you start editing and playing with those filters. So make sure to like the video, comment, and let me know what you want to see next. And if you're new to the channel, subscribe. In any case, I'll see you guys next time. Take care.